if you look at our contract, like you have the offer price and earnest money is second. And a lot of people get that confused as this huge security blanket. Most of the time, earnest money gets refunded, but it still shows a level of seriousness.
The biggest one is probably the inspection period. You know, and with that comes the earnest money, because the number one question that I always get with new buyers, if I don't like this property and we find something wrong in the inspection, can I get my money back? Welcome to the Cash Flow Pros podcast. I'm Jordan.
I'm Todd.
I'm Rob.
And we miss you all.
Yeah, we miss you.
In digital space.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from, but
Yeah.
I'm liking it. I'm
Todd's
feeling
on
good
one
today.
I can respect that. That's
Start us out with a song.
You came for the information, you left with the tunes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
They literally stopped the podcast now.
Yeah.
So we actually got feedback from one of our avid listeners, Mark, who wasn't for one of the interviews this last week. His episode's not out. But you gave him some feedback, or he gave us some feedback because he listens, and it was really good. So he's like, man, I just love all the love that you guys are giving me.
Yeah, I think we were trashing all over him.
No,
on the
we weren't
podcast.
trashing him.
We were just being honest. Those are two different things.
Well, it was interesting because you basically said that he's kind of a glass half full guy.
Empty,
No.
half empty.
Yeah, half empty. And to be honest, like, I thought about that some, and I was like, I think we all, as entrepreneurs and investors, have to live in those two spaces.
Yeah.
There's times when you have to look at a deal as a half empty thing
Yeah.
of like, I need to find out worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I need to think it through. And then you have to flip the switch and say, but can it be good? But can it work? And
There's a fine line.
it's
He
very
just
fine.
totes the
Yeah.
half empty.
We all,
line,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
tote the half full, so it's
very
it evens
full
itself
sometimes.
out. Yeah.
Anyway, so today we're talking about, it's another beginner series, if you will, and we're talking about getting houses under contract and walking through the inspection process, offers, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is the exciting part. When we were talking about it beforehand, Rob was going through all the different ways of doing offers. He sounded so pumped to like go through this episode. So.
Well, it's kind of almost the climax of energy for your whole investment. You've already been researching and learning, and you're excited. Your glass is definitely half full at this point.
Yeah, can be.
When you're going into that first offer on your first property.
That's true.
And so now is the point where it gets real. You make an offer and you say, I will buy this property at this price and these terms. Here you go.
No
What do you
backing
say?
out after that. Zero inspection period.
And here's this earnest money check.
Yeah.
The pre-approval and all that kind of process is like, it is important. You got to do it, and you got to figure out property manager, the stuff we previously talked about.
Yeah.
But it feels very not tangible.
Right.
Yeah, it's
And
not.
this becomes the tangible part of like, this is property okay, we're doing this. thing.
Signing your name on all these places.
You
on
can
the
get a
contract.
pre-approval for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to go do all that. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You can never do anything with it.
Yeah.
This is the doing something with it.
It gets real when you're signing your name, writing a check.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. It does.
So let's talk about it. You want to get something under contract. You found a property that works. How do you get a contract accepted? How do you write it up? All those kinds of things.
I think there's a difference between what it was a couple years ago, and we were talking about this earlier, versus what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
A couple years ago, we were having to be so creative with bring in your inspector during your showing period. You got to go 10 grand over asking to get it happen. Some people were just waiving inspections altogether. Don't ever suggest that. Just doing whatever it took to get the deal.
Yeah.
And it's just a different space than it is right now.
Yeah, I told some of my buyers that I was working with during that time, I said budget like $1,000 or a little more for just inspections, and realize that is just the cost of doing business, because we may look at a house or two and we really like it, need to get it inspected and make a decision and still not get an offer accepted.
It's possible.
And that was negotiating, and that was adding value as an agent back then.
Right.
Very different time than every other time in
Yeah.
the history of real estate, probably.
Yeah.
It's never really been quite like that I know of. And but now, very different. I think from an agent's perspective, how we can add value for clients is a lot more about knowing. It's still kind of the same skill set, knowing what's going on in the market, what offers are getting accepted, what sellers are expecting, what other agents are expecting, and being able to put together offers that will get accepted, get you the house you want, but also at the best price and terms still.
So in today's market, and obviously I think it's different in every location that you look at, you buy something in Inslee versus what we're dealing with in Forestdale trying to sell ours versus Vestavia or Hoover, like the house you're selling right now. What do you think is probably the most important thing that people are looking at as agents and sellers right now?
Well, I think the financing is such a question mark.
Yeah.
I mean, cash is definitely still king. And so people like to see that. I mean, I think we've seen owner-occupant buyers, we've seen investor buyers of properties in the more investor areas have not really been there on tenant-occupied properties. So somebody who's buying a home to come live in it and make it their home is definitely, it's really always been kind of a preferred offer.
Yeah.
If that's what you're putting out there.
Cash versus, say, like somebody comes to you with a first-time home buyer loan.
Yeah.
You're as the seller probably going to take the cash. You're waiving appraisal because of the cash generally.
Yeah.
You're more likely to close. You can close quicker if you have to. There's a lot more you can do creatively with cash versus, let's say, a first-time home buyer.
Yeah.
Or even a conventional mortgage, for that matter.
And I think if you are that, and we're kind of gearing this towards first-time investors, so things that you can put in the contract that will make it more attractive, a shorter inspection period. I would say 5 days is usually plenty, but it's also a very short.
Most people are 7.
Yeah.
I feel like when we're putting, and 2 days, it's not a crazy difference in terms of being able to get the inspector out there. But when a seller looks at it, to them, that's 2 less days they have to have it off market if something comes up that they can't agree to.
Yeah. So shortening timeframes on inspections and on closing is very attractive for agents. And anything you can do to solidify your financing, if you can have like some lenders will do like pre-underwriting and to where they've already gone through way farther in the process of loan approval, way farther than just pre-approval.
Yeah, then you make X amount of money.
Yeah, they've really checked into everything. They already know it's all good. And when you say, like, it's already, all we need is the appraisal and we're ready to do this loan.
Yeah. You do a ton of listings, Todd, a ton. I mean, just hundreds of them every year, it feels like. So you see a lot of offers come in.
Correct.
And a lot of what you do list as of now, you have a lot of investment properties that you do list. What are you seeing in terms of the market right now with offers that are coming in? I know you've probably got houses that have multiple offers. I know you got some that are probably sitting a little while. With the ones that sit a little while versus the ones that just put out there and have multiple offers, what differences are you seeing? Everybody's not writing the same offers.
Yeah, so a good offer is clean in the sense that the terms are very clear and there's not a lot of like extra language in the addendum. Like if this happens, then this happens. And when this happens, this happens. It's like our contract for the most part is relatively clear. There's a few things I'd like to change about it.
Yeah.
But, a clean offer already has everything kind of checkboxed. I'm looking for an agent who has everything filled out. So there's a lot of contracts I look at and they're not as thoroughly done. There's a few nuances to them. And because I look at so many contracts, I know the agents who know their stuff and who don't know their stuff. So that's kind of what I look first off the bat, but I'm also talking with lenders. I call the lenders and I say like, how far, like you were talking about, how far are they truly through a pre-approval? Because there's lenders who just say, hey, your credit score's here, your income's here, sounds good.
Yeah.
There's other lenders who say, I'm going to call and I'm going to need W-2 stubs and I need your tax returns and I need to see this. And you're right. They effectively underwrite that investor or that owner occupant almost fully. And then they say, okay, go find your house and you're truly approved for this. So I'm having those conversations with lenders and saying, what kind of lender are you? Have you really fully vetted this person? And I need the assurance that they're going to close. Even that said, we still have stuff fall out because the seller or the buyer didn't disclose certain things, or they didn't think they needed to. But then, when the true underwriting process happens, they're like, oh, well, where's this gap of income or all that? So those are really big indicators of that. I think earnest money, if you look at our contract, like you have the offer price and earnest money is second.
Yep.
And a lot of people get that confused as this huge security blanket. Most of the time, earnest money gets refunded as long as everybody's following the contract.
Yeah.
But it still shows a level of seriousness.
Yeah.
If you're putting $500 versus $1,500 or $2,000, there's a level of seriousness that you're communicating with that earnest money, that you're like, I'm bought in, I'm going to risk this amount because that is important to me. And your flip would be a perfectly good example. I think Crossbow, when we were bidding for it, I put a bid in and you put a bid in, and your terms were, your price point I think was slightly lower than mine.
Yes. Yeah.
But
I think it was.
you weren't contingent on inspection.
No.
And you put down a significant amount of earnest money.
I think I put, maybe it was $5,000.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And I think I put $1,000.
Yeah.
And so they looked at those two offers.
Yeah.
And yours blew mine out of the water. Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Not because they're like, we can make a little bit more money with this other guy, but this guy's serious. And I will say I was serious,
of
but
course.
you were more serious.
Yeah, I'm just willing to hop in.
Yeah.
Glass is half full.
Glass is half full.
Glass is half full.
The sewage was still a problem, but I expected it, so it's easier to go in.
So working with a buyer's agent like you or me or Rob, we know how to communicate a level of seriousness in the offer, in the approval, and also in the conversations we have with the agent because of the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that no matter what offer you're making, on any piece of property you're ever going to buy, really making the listing agent or the seller feel very secure and confident in your offer. There's thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to be made in that.
Yeah.
And giving them over a career millions.
Yeah.
And that giving them that real confidence in your offer over anything else that could be out there.
So let's talk about, so now we're in a space where not everything's popping off the market in 2 days.
Yeah.
And especially, some some tenant occupied properties, we're getting less offers currently in this market. And I think it's going to climb a little bit, especially if rates pop down. But they didn't pop down this last, thing. Walk me through the thoughts on how to negotiate a discount.
I think there's something to be said for, you can always just throw out whatever offer, but I think knowing the property that you're buying, and I guess it comes back to having an agent or yourself really knowing the market really well, because if it's priced, like let's say you're looking for a flip and it's priced at about half of what the ARV should be, it needs work, it's in bad shape, somebody's going to pay list price or higher on that. I can already tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to work, almost no matter where it is in this city. But if it's, priced at maybe 90% of ARV, it's probably going to sit for a long time. And you may make an offer lower at like 50% of ARV, and it's going to just get ignored for a long time until maybe it gets accepted. You don't
Right.
know. In this market, it might, because people will eventually get ready to get acclimated to the reality of where it's at.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to the price, but there's so many other things about the offer. You can communicate seriousness, you know, that effectively even if you're at 50%, you can kind of show like, yeah, I'm at 50%, but I'm going to close.
Yeah.
And then it kind of is like, well, they're not exactly at the price, but maybe if they're at 60% of where I want to be, I would consider it because I'm ready to move on from this property.
And I think sometimes informing, you know, not every agent knows much about selling listing properties or selling investment properties, knows that much about how investors work. So if you tell them, you know, let's say you're trying to get that one that I just described.
Yeah.
If you tell the listing agent something like, this is an investor offer. I know you're probably looking for an owner occupant to come and buy this, and I hope you do. But from an investor standpoint, this is what any investor is going to pay, and I'm ready to do it.
Yeah.
And I've got the money right here. So if they decide they want the just kind of easy sale, guaranteed sale kind of experience, then I'm your guy. You know?
My name's Rob Drummond.
But if you're going to hold out for an owner occupant to buy this with all its flaws, go ahead. Like,
yeah, you may eventually find it, but you could be sitting here for another 6 months.
Yeah.
And probably still have to give them a discount. I mean, because they have to fix it up, and you still probably have to concede something, you know, repairs. And there's certain properties. Honestly, we've seen a tightening in even conventional appraisals coming back with repair requirements.
Good for them.
And so, which is not often. You typically see the repair requirements with FHA, but we're seeing it with some conventionals because I think they're tightening on their restrictions of just like what we want to own, basically, because the bank or whoever takes on that mortgage really truly owns that property, you know, the debt on it. And they're just not willing to take as many risks. So some of the properties out there that investors can buy, owner occupants can't. They're just too in disarray. They have too many repairs. And so it does provide an opportunity where you can say, hey, you may not be ready for this offer, but come down the road, you'll find that you can't sell this to an owner occupant, and we'll be here waiting.
Yeah.
And then follow up and all that kind of stuff is important.
Yeah. So I've got a question for y'all. What is, with a newer buyer, what are your FAQs about the contract and the process? Like, what are the things that you're having to kind of fill in the blanks or explain about our contract to them?
I would probably say, as crazy as it sounds, because it feels easy to me, the biggest one is probably the inspection period. You know, and with that comes the earnest money, because the number one question that I always get with new buyers, if I don't like this property and we find something wrong in the inspection, can I get my money back? You know, and I have to tell them, yes, if you follow the contract, you know, we put it in for 7 days. We have 3 days to respond. After that, if you find something that you can't work with the seller on, you can get your money back. But you have to negotiate in good faith, is what I always try to tell them up front. You know, you can't come in and find out that you don't like the blinds and the floor has a couple bad spots and you want $10,000 off.
Right.
That's not negotiating in good faith, you know, and there's people that'll try to do that. But to negotiate in good faith, it's your pipe is crushed going to the road. They're not willing to spend the $7,000 to fix it. You want 10 grand. They say, no, I'm not going to pay that much and I don't want to do it. Then yes, you part ways because you negotiated in good faith and you get your earnest money back.
Yeah.
But most people are terrified of that.
Yeah.
They just think that money, the earnest money, is just going to disappear.
Yeah. Todd, questions you get on the process or the contract?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some nuances like homestead, like where taxes come from. So properties that are occupied by a owner are typically, not always, but typically should be homesteaded, which makes the taxes less. And then properties that are tenant occupied can't be homesteaded. So the taxes are increased, and that number is about 1.5 to 1.8 of the owner-occupant tax. And so when people are looking at properties, they don't quite understand that. And so you have to walk them through like, okay, this property previously was owner-occupant. Your taxes, if you're going to turn this into an investment, it's going to be higher. You need to calculate for that. And so that's one of the nuances of it. Surprisingly enough, it's a simple thing, but a lot of people, because survey is on our contract, we typically don't ask for a survey. They can be helpful in certain situations, but for most part, it is overkill on a purchase. But everybody sees that, and they're like,
well, where's my property line?
Where's my property line? Do I need this?
Yeah.
And to walk people through of what they do need and what they don't need. Termite contract's important, so explaining a termite contract and wood infestation report, those are always questions that come up. And then, I would agree 100% with Ernest. People are scared when their money's out there. They're like, when do I get to put it in and all that kind of stuff. So that definitely happens.
And this is very basic, but that earnest money check you write gets applied towards your down payment and your purchase eventually. Some people don't realize that when they first. You want to be sure
they think it's an addition.
You want to know that's going towards your purchase. It's going to be applied
to it.
At closing. Another thing I would say is just that, like, our contract, the way it was explained to me is our contract has been legislated so many times, gone through so many lawyers' eyes, that there's all these sections that can be confusing. And, that's why reading through or having somebody who really understands what it all means, wood infestation, termite, sewer survey, and the kind of practical application of it is very helpful.
Having a survey when you go buy a 40-acre property for farmland, okay, that will make sense. But having a survey for a neighborhood that's been here since 1980, that's been established, is on the plat map, it's been drawn out for 40 years, and it's been passed through 4 different families, you don't probably need a survey.
We sold a property that was commercially zoned, and they wanted to turn it into, like, they were going to use it for their HVAC company and as a car lot. And so they got a survey because they wanted to know exactly where the property lines were so they could build within and
put
do
cars
things.
in there.
But and they did that in their due diligence. So I think another thing that comes up is that whole due diligence process. At what point is the earnest money locked in? At what point do we have to communicate terms? And I was talking with another agent, and this is something that I learned, about our contract. So, in the due diligence process, if a buyer basically puts out a addendum request, the seller has a certain amount of time to respond to that request.
3 days.
If they do not respond, have they agreed or disagreed to those terms?
They've agreed to them.
They've agreed to them.
That's in the contract?
That's in the contract.
Oh, wow. That's tricky.
It's tricky. So effectively, you have to know that on both sides because,
it's the same on the buyer side too.
Yeah. And a lot of times, we do a lot of tenant occupied stuff where, I just filed an extension because of this very rule that I kind of came to know a little bit better. Because we're extending all the time because tenants aren't available in 3 days.
Yeah.
And we have to get quotes and we have to get pricing. And when you ask for a repair, it's not just like send the guy over tomorrow. Like, you have to line that up with the tenant.
It's
that
hard.
tenant may not respond for another 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
And so you've lost your quote unquote window of time to respond to that, and you've just agreed to it.
Yeah.
So these are nuances that hiring an agent like ourselves, we can help walk you through what feels like a really scary process. It's actually relatively simple, but you got to know the
process. Yeah. So that's what we do. That's why we get paid
so
the big
let's
bucks.
talk about, so you get it under contract, you get the property basically like inspected. You put in those repairs. They say, that sounds great. We'll do those repairs. Send that back to you. What's the next step? how do I actually own the house? What happens here? What is happening in the world before I finally sign on the dotted line and all the, what is in that third part of the process?
Well, the bank has to come out to appraise the property.
Right.
To make sure it's worth what's in the mortgage. And while that's going on at the same time, in the background, title's being pulled on the property to make sure that somebody along the road hasn't put a mechanic's lien, or there's a mortgage out there that we don't know about, that, if you do get to the closing table and you don't know those things, you buy a house that somebody's got a $40,000 lien against, you didn't know it, that's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good.
And it also tells the title work tells the lineage of that property. It went from Joe Smith to Tamara Smith, and then from Tamara, and it shows the who owned it before, who owned it along that lines, and there's clear title to it. And then once all of that underwriting, the appraisal comes back, they fund it, they say you have what's called a clear to close. That is the official bank lending if you're not using cash. The lawyer in our state, lawyers close our transactions. They write up what's called a HUD, and that HUD basically says all of the details of who's being charged what, taxes and termite fees and all the nuances of it. And you walk through that and you say, yep, this is exactly my understanding of how this transaction should go. And then you go to the close table. Mm-hmm. Simple, right?
Easy.
HUD, also called closing statement, closing disclosure.
Alta.
There's like a lot of names for it. They're all the same thing.
And
they all basically just tell you what the numbers are.
Yeah.
But there's probably more names than that.
There's more names than that. And none of the lawyers seem to use the same name.
Yeah.
No.
But I would say probably on a HUD, I find, and I wouldn't even call them mistakes, it's just needing clarification, but I would say I send back 25% of my HUDs to get changes done.
A lot of times they forget to change what the repair addendum was. If you request a concession, or, you need to write a check to my property manager for this. A lot of times, sometimes that'll get lost in there, and that's usually what I have to fix.
Let's talk about fees, property manager fees that should or should not be on the HUD, and why you would put them there.
Do we want to talk about it? I have a lot of clients who don't really need the concessions, because let's say they find out there's $10,000 worth of repairs that need to be done. First off, I know the seller's not going to give them that much. Generally, you meet somewhere in the middle, or on the $2,000, $3,000, somewhere in that range side, and that's not enough to do all the repairs. But the property manager's handling everything anyways. So a lot of times they like to have the check just go out of escrow directly to the property manager, so there's no under the table, hey, you're paying me an extra $2,000 to take this kind of thing. Now I think there's ramifications for putting it on the HUD and not putting it on the HUD.
Yeah, so another thing that gets transferred is if it is tenant occupied, you have rent prorated.
Yep.
And so that percentage, if it's halfway through the month, the seller gets half of that money and you get the other half of the money, So that's one thing that happens. And then there's also security deposits. And if you're staying with that same property manager, then you would just say, keep the security deposit, transfer it to my account. But if you're moving it to your own self-management or something like that, I have found it's best to put that in the closing statement, so that it's all taken care of and you're not hounding your property manager, the old property manager, to get your security deposit. You have all the rate. Now, you can send that HUD and say, hey, I didn't get my prorated rate. It is money owed to you. No matter what. If it's on the HUD or if it's not on the HUD, it's money owed to you. But you then have to go to that old property manager and say, hey, I need my prorated rent and I need my security deposit. Here's the HUD to verify I did not get that at closing.
It's a lot harder to get if you don't do it at the closing table.
Just do it at closing.
I just dealt with one where people might, I don't even know if I can talk about it, but they did not do it on the closing statement, and the seller is just like, yeah, I'm not paying you that money.
Which they can't legally do.
They can't legally do, but it's such a small amount. Like, you got to chase them down. You got to go
So
for it.
let's kind of summarize from a buyer's perspective, from that point of You've signed a inspection addendum, and now you're looking towards close. You are working on getting the lender all the documents they need. You're verifying that any repairs that are supposed to be done are done. You are probably not going to have a lot to do with the appraisal. The agents are taking care of it. Lender is going to just kind of happen. And then I would say your third main job is look at everything on the HUD and make sure that it lines up with what it's supposed to be. All the little numbers, read it 3 times and make sure you understand everything.
Yeah, jump on a call with us and say, help me understand. There's been a lot of stuff that I don't, they don't understand, and I have to get clarity for,
Because every attorney it'll say something different at the top, but also all the line items will be different.
Listen, here's the deal.
Like 6 words.
We have a standard contract. Why can't we have a standard closing statement?
Between all the freaking lawyers, please, Scott.
Please, just y'all get on the same page.
Is it an Alta? Is it a CD? I don't care. Just make it look the same.
It is. And that is one of the small things why we like using some consistent attorneys that we work with a lot, because I know certain closing statements like the back of my hand. Yeah. And other ones I'm like, whoa, this is like gibberish.
There's 6 pages here. What do we need 6 pages for? Yeah.
So, but yeah, that is the buying process. And that is a big part of when you lean on an agent that you're working with, their experience to walk you through all of those steps. Because some of it's still scary, some of it you're putting earnest money out, all these different things. But if you do it right and you kind of understand it, and then you work with the agent and you guys collaborate on making sure the timelines are hit and stuff, it's really a relatively simple process. So.
For anybody that's a new buyer, and I think this works whether it's in Birmingham or Los Angeles, I think there's about 5 things that are probably very similar and the most important things to an offer of any type of real estate property. How are you financing it? Conventional FHA, cash, how are you going about doing that? Price, do you need to be above asking price, below asking price? Can you get away with being a little bit creative there? Earnest money, that's very important to say I'm serious, and it's part of the process of consideration has to be made. Whether it's money or I'll trade you a Rolex for it, consideration of some type has to be made to go through. Inspection period, short, long. The shorter you are, the better you look to the seller of that property. And lastly, there's a lot of other things, but I think this is one of the last biggest ones is closing. How fast can you close? Yep. Sometimes that changes for conventional lending, FHA lending versus cash. But sometimes you can work with your lender to shorten that time period, even if it's just by 5 to 7 days. That looks better than just a standard conventional or FHA loan or cash, and you can go to a week if title's good.
Yeah, that's the process.
That's it.
Top to bottom.
Easy.
Yeah.
We actually have documents that walk you through that, and that's always helpful. So you can reach out to us and we can get those to you. But the beginner series, the whole goal is to talk through the basics, because even in the basics, there's nuances to it that can help you be successful or get frustrated. And so hopefully this helps guide people in that right way.
Remove some question marks, remove some fear from the process, or unclarity. I don't think that's a word, but
lack of clarity. Yeah. So
if you do got question marks, that's what we're here for.
Yep.
That's what we do.
That's what we do every day.
Every day.
Literally
Literally every day.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Hopefully this is helpful.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
All right. See y'all.